I'm the type of person, if you ask me a question and I don't know the answer, I'm gonna tell you that I don't know. But I bet you what, I know how to find the answer, and I will find the answer.
Alright, Dave McCorge, it is of course Irish for a very warm welcome, my friends, to Shamrocks and Shanks, and another episode where we get to learn from some of the best professionals in the golf world. Now, my guest for this episode is Derek Ingram. Derek is the head coach for Golf Canada's national men's amateur and pro teams, and independent of that, he's also the coach to Corey Connors, Taylor Pendrith, and many other elite players. And also on top of that, he's a published author, so he's really got everything going here. Although Derek's job takes him on the road the majority of the year, his role within Golf Canada and his experience of the elite amateur game gives him a unique global perspective on the game of golf from all levels. For this episode, we chat about helping club golfers improve and what one of those stumbling blocks. We discuss winter climate challenges and indoor golf training. We chat about the grip and how its level of importance is not really reflected in the direction of online information. And lastly, Derek suggests a few strategies that can help you with your on-course process, absolutely direct from his book, Sports Psych for Golf. In the coaching section, we chat about Derek's influences to this point on technique and coaching, how he uses tech like 3D to help his understanding of how his players perform their best. We discuss the work he's currently doing with Corey and Taylor and some putting content. And lastly, we chat about his current project, Tour Habits, which he co-founded alongside Tristan Mullally. Now, I always enjoy chatting to experienced and educated coaches, and sometimes you come across the trifecta of experienced, educated, but still so hungry to learn and improve. Not only does Derek Ingram tick all those boxes with ease, but he also brings with it a sense of appreciation and joy for what he does, which, if we're all honest, this game can sometimes take from us from time to time. So, thoroughly enjoyable episode, thoroughly enjoyable person to talk to, and one of the best coaches in Canada, Derek Ingram. All right, Derek Ingram, very, very warm welcome to Shamrocks and Shanks. Thank you for joining us on the podcast. I've kind of gotten to know you a little bit more over the last, let's say, half a year as we've talked about certain things and certain aspects. And I'm really excited to have you on the show because you have a unique perspective coming from golf coaching, that you've made your way up the ladder of Golf Canada, so to speak, and now kind of head of Team Canada, let's say, in terms of developing both the young golfers and the guys who are on tour now. So a very unique perspective on the golf landscape. But again, very, very warm welcome. And if we wanted to start off, perhaps people who aren't overly familiar with your name, maybe 2 or 3 minutes, just, a little bit about your career today and where you are right now.
Well, thanks first, Steve, for having me. Super fun to be here. I was expecting a care package before we got on with a couple of Guinness. I thought this was a Guinness podcast. We got to share one, but I'll expect that.
That was only before 17th of March. You missed the boat, see.
It's just like another deadline I missed. But anyway, my position with Golf Canada now is I oversee our young pro program. I have some holistic duties, with our amateur team and our junior team and all of golf in Canada. But for the most part, I stay in my lane and I coach golf. And I coach our men's young pro squad. And I'm responsible for some guys on the Corn Ferry Tour. We've got 5 there. And I also coach Jared Dutois. And I've got a couple of coaches that I help and mentor as well with Golf Canada. And then I'm fortunate enough to coach a couple of guys outside of Golf Canada on my own. I coach Corey Connors and Taylor Pendrith on the PGA Tour. And I coach Aaron Cockrell on the DP World Tour as well.
Fantastic. So you do probably have a really nice global view of everything going on, especially when it comes to golf in Canada. If we, and in this podcast, we try to go the first half talking about club golfers and how your information can help them. They've probably heard enough about me over the time. And then the second half, we go to more golf coaches and again, how your experience and your education and journey can help them. So if we start off with those club golfers, what are some of the things you see as the challenges for them in learning to develop and grow their game? Because, when we look at statistically, are we getting better as club golfers? Maybe not as much as we would like to think, and having so much information now. So what do you think are some of those stumbling blocks holding players back from improving year on year?
It's interesting. You're right. I see those stats and they're not really getting better. Hopefully they're having fun and loving the game and developing great friendships and just love being out there and getting great exercise. But I think there's a couple simple things on how you practice. And I'm not saying, listen, you got to turn into a tour player here and practice for hours a day, but 15 minutes, 3 times a week on some targeted areas can make a gigantic difference. I'll use a simple case here, Steve. You're on the chipping green before you go play, and you're chipping just a few balls just to warm up. And everyone chips, 10 balls to the same target with the same club from the same lie. Actually, putting it on a good lie. As simple as, hey, just throwing the balls around and having random lies, and then pitching those shots or chipping those shots to 3 different targets or 4 different targets, maybe even with varying the clubs or the trajectory. And all of a sudden you've improved the value of your practice by 100-fold. You've gotten way better, and you're going to get way better results just because you're looking at different lies. You're looking at different hole locations or different pins to try and hit different shots, and maybe varying the trajectory. So in your 10 minutes or 7 minutes of practice, you've become that much more valuable. And I think that will help you. And there's so many cases around how you practice on the putting green, in the short game area, your full swing, that you can do that as a club golfer without, again, not trying to be a PGA Tour player, but just spending, if I'm going to be out here for 10 or 15 minutes, I might be a little more creative in how I'm practicing.
Do you think there's a difference between how maybe I would approach it if I have 15 minutes before my tee time versus 15 minutes on a Wednesday afternoon and I'm not playing with the lads? Like, should I be a little bit more like that before I go out in the tee box, maybe introducing more variability like I might encounter on the golf course too, eh?
Yeah, I think both. Like in your practice, maybe you got an hour practice session, you've got a family at home, and you can only carve out 45 minutes or an hour. Doesn't mean you can't enjoy your practice. That could be your sanctuary. But again, let's target 2 or 3 things to make it get a little more bang for our buck in that practice. And then certainly before you go play, there's no question, like, most people don't do a PGA Tour warm-up where they go to the gym, well in advance.
Get stretched out.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they're lucky to get 30 minutes or 25 minutes before they go play, but use those 20 minutes to get a little bit better, or to mimic the game a little bit, like you said, a little more variability and some shots you're going to get on the golf course. And I just think it's so, and that's one of the reasons Tristan and I came up with Tour Habits. We wanted to help people practice in a more effective way because we thought everybody's doing golf swing right now. And it's a little bit easy to do, quite frankly. Not that there isn't some, not that it's not cool and we all don't love it. We do, but it's, that's what we thought. That's why we came up a little bit with Tour Habits, to help people practice a little bit more effectively.
Yeah, and Tour Habits is this company you've created alongside Tristan Mullally, and we'll definitely talk about that towards the end of the podcast, and kind of your mission statement and what you guys are doing, which is fantastic. It's always interesting listening to other coaches talk about how their players would practice. And I was with Sean Foley a couple of weeks ago, or a couple of months ago now, in Florida, and he was talking about Tiger and how some days Tiger would arrive at the range, or Tiger was ready to range. Sean would walk up and go, "Hey bud, how's it going?" And Tiger would go, "You know what, Foles, just don't have it today, so we're gonna have to grind it out." And he would nearly flip that in encountering some other players who would go, "I don't have it today, but I got to find it before I get to the first tee." And Tiger was very just accepting of it and going, "You know what? It's going to be challenging today, but I'll deal with it." And I'm welcoming the challenge of it. It's just a really interesting, different world number one mindset,
He was so good, Tiger, at not having his best stuff and still winning, which is absolutely amazing. Not just playing good, not just giving, but actually he would win with his mediocre stuff, which is, it is staggering.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. Moving nicely along, actually, from the practice side of things and how we can improve. Definitely, we're not the only country, let's say, with this challenging climate in the winter where we can't get outside to play golf. So definitely environments are getting better and facilities are getting better in terms of simulators like you're in right now. What are some of the advice that you give to your players who are located and based in Canada, who encounter those issues that maybe for whatever reason, they have to be here for a month or 2 months, they can't get down to the base, the warm weather training in Florida? What are you saying to them as guidelines when they go indoors to practice? And, not necessarily like exact drills, but maybe some nice kind of, okay, well, maybe don't do too much of this. Maybe have a look at this. Like, should we be doing more variability, play a virtual 9 holes, or should we be just looking at data parameters? Do you have any guidelines in what you're asking your players to do from there?
Well, first of all, I live in the high performance world. So most of my people are down south year round. Lots of them do come back for a break, and they might be here for, like you said, for a week or 2 or a month, or even 5 or 6 weeks or 8 weeks. So sometimes if they're having a break, I want them to have a break. I don't want them just grinding in the simulator for 8 hours. I want them to work out because it feels good and you look good and you're happy when you work out. So you work out in that off time and you get really dial in your fitness and enjoy that. Get the tunes pumping and blast. And then when you do practice, I do like the idea of doing a little bit of work. So having a bit of a plan. I'm gonna warm up. I'm gonna have a base station, check a couple of key things for my base station. And then I might do a couple drills in the simulator. And now with the technology we have with Foresight and all the other ones, it's so much easier than it used to be just hitting into a net. And then I like him to play because we play this game because we love it and we're trying to score, even if it's in a simulator and you're kind of getting a little pissed off because the putting's off or your chipping's off. I still want him, but it's fun too. And then you leave. Oh, that was fun. I'll come back tomorrow and I'm going to have another good session and that, or I might even close up. So base station, working on a couple things for 5 to 15 minutes, a couple drills or a full warm up, couple drills or tests. Play and then close down with a couple tests or the base station again, and then you're done. But don't grind all day, every day in Winnipeg or in Toronto in the winter. I got a 12-hour session in the sim. I mean, you're going to hate it in a hurry if you do that, but use these great technologies to your advantage. But an hour to 2 is plenty, as you know.
I think that's a really good point, right? That you're still enjoying it, that you enjoy it enough to come back the next day. We were last week, a good buddy of mine, normally when I go to the sim here locally, I'm teaching, right? So it's go to teach. Yeah. And a buddy of mine went to play last week and we went down and it was great fun. And it was the system had defaulted to auto put. And we played like 5 holes. We were playing at Dare Manor back home in Ireland. Awesome. I was like, oh man, this is annoying. Let's put on the manual put. Well, it lasted about 3 holes where we put back on the auto put again. Because like you said, we were like hitting them all over the place. And like, this is getting frustrating, but we had fun with it. That was the main thing. Sure. If we kind of moved into the technique side of things here, and I'd be kind of on the back end looking more and more grip in terms from a 3D perspective and exploring some case studies around that. It's definitely a hot topic in the perspective of club golfers. Nearly the one thing, if you had a survey, what's the one thing you don't want to change when you go to a lesson? It would probably be kind of nearly like that family value show, be like a high percentage answer. What are your perspectives on grip, changing grip with club golfers? And I know, as you said, you don't really work with that many club players right now. But previously, perhaps, is it something that you're willing to change, that you think the value of the change in circumstances is warranted because it's their only connection to the club? Or do you feel, you know what, I can work around it to the most part? So more or less getting at these club golfers who perhaps are looking at grip changes. Do you think there's value in it?
It's so funny because I'm so opposite what the trend is in the last 5 or 7 years, where people like, oh, the grip's not a fundamental, it's not important, don't change that. Whatever, someone comes with a brutal grip, that's okay, you can work around it. And listen, I'm a skilled enough coach, and I know you are, Steve, as well, that we can work around that. But to me, that doesn't make any sense. If I want to produce a world-class golfer or a good player, if I want to help someone get better, like you said, the most important and the only connection we have to that implement is our hands on the grip. And I like to start there. Or I think that's, if I've got no issue change, I'm like, that looks horrific. We're never going to get to where we want to be with that. Let's make a little dabble change here. Yeah. Can I work around it with tour players, or do I work around it with really, really high performance players who've had the same funky grip for a longest time, and they say that's a non-starter, I don't want to do that? I'm like, okay, fine, I'll work around it. I'm good. I like that. That's a great challenge for me. But I don't, if someone's open to getting better and they want to see how good they can get, and even if they're Mrs. Haberkamp at the club, but she wants to get better, and if it's horrible, it's horrible. Let's face it, it's crap. Let's fix it up and make it better. And so I'm on the other end of the spectrum that a lot of people are right now, because it's not very fashionable to talk about. And I believe the grip is a fundamental. I think it's really important, and I got no issues changing it.
Yeah, I think you made some really, really good points there. Number one, when you would get on tour, now we're not talking every single player, but if we were at Sawgrass last week and we're standing on that first tee box and we took a picture of every single grip that went through, yeah, we'd see variance on the spectrum of strength so far. So rotating right, left, towards target away. But most of the time it would be pretty functional, let's say. And again, even in these, one of my little bugbears about social media is people using high performance athletes to back up an argument for individuality. I'm like, well, you're talking about a person, 0.00% who is really good at that. They just found their way. And as you said, hey, if a guy's really, really good and I just need to tweak some, I'm probably not changing the grip no matter what it looks like.
Yeah.
But if you're talking to a club player who's off 24, how they're positioning their wrists, their forearms, that all that influenced by how those hands sit on, they're trying to adapt around that rather than helping them.
And if you can get it early before they start moving, Steve, we can fix so many things.
Oh yeah.
Or they fix them themselves. We're just setting them up for success as opposed to setting them up for failure. I don't know if we have time for a quick.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
Because it's really relevant, because it was last week on Saturday, Corey played with Russ Henley in the third round. Corey's got a bit of a long thumb. It sometimes pokes up under the trail hand on his lead hand, and that's one of those things that kind of rattles me a little bit. With the golf glove, seeing that long thumb, and I've tried to change it over the years with Corey getting it shorter. I like Taylor's thumb actually a little shorter, but anyway, I realized that hey, he's comfortable with his grip. It's worked. We've made some tweaks. It's better than it was when he was a junior. And it's really good. But I remember at times really pressing about that long thumb poking out. So anyway, we're warming up on Saturday morning. Right beside us is Russ Henley, and they battle it out at the Arnold Palmer the week before. And I like Russ Henley. I think he's a stud. I think he's quietly one of the best 10 players on earth. And I'm looking at Corey warming up. We're doing our thing. And I look over at Russ, and he's got the exact same grip as Corey, where the thumb's poking out just a little bit under that. And I'm like, think to myself, well, what do you know, Derek? Like, I was just laughing to myself. I said nothing to Corey or anybody, but I was just cracking myself up because I'm like, geez, I remember I tried to change that with Corey. It's one of those things that kind of bothers me just a teeny bit.
Yeah.
And here are two guys in the top 25 in the game playing it, and they're gripping it like that. And it was something I didn't really like that much. So anyway, it's kind of interesting.
It's interesting, isn't it, when you see that? And it'd nearly be if you had got Corey to change, he'd turn around and go, look.
I know. He'd be like, Russ Henley beat me last week by 2, and look at his grip. But anyway,
thumbs up for Russ.
But the effort was there. And I'm not afraid to try something. If it doesn't work, just put a bullet in it, and say, hey, that didn't work. I've done that. I've got the kind of relationship with Corey and other players where if I make a mistake or if it's not right for them, or we give it a good effort and it doesn't work, we can back off and say, no, good effort. I was wrong. Let's move on.
Yeah. I think that's really important, right? You have the trust because you've known those guys for so long. And I think being that way inclined as a person and as a coach, where you're, very kind of very honest and going, what, I'm not going to get everything right. Sometimes this is humans dealing with humans. We're going to have explorations. We might go down the road. As long as we're both magnanimous enough to go, well, okay, that's the wrong thing to do. Let's back it up a little bit. We're good. And we have that trust factor. And I like the grip personally, because when I'm, maybe working with a club player and perhaps they don't practice as much, and you're working on something to do with mechanics, like obviously they're not looking, when they're swinging the golf club. So they're down and looking eyes, roughly speaking, for the most part, in and around golf ball. And they're trying to feel something different. And that's very hard for them to work on.
Yeah.
I'm like the grip, like you can change that before the club even gets pulled back. So you have feedback. You can use your visual, 80% of that sensory feedback before you even pull the club back. So although it's harder to get used to the sensation, in terms of actually working on it, I find it easier.
Oh, no question. I mean, the change is it's not a dynamic, it's in a static position.
Yeah.
That change in the gripper setup, and boom, it affects the swing and the contact, and so much better, and how the the club is moving and the arms and the body are moving in space. I love those things that we can do as opposed to we got that 1.5 second or less. We're trying to change a bunch of things. I mean, anyway, it's I think it's one of the things that I do not believe that is not a fundamental. But I've been wrong. I'm open to changing. I'm certainly trying to learn and be like, and I also understand the other argument too. Hey, no, it's not a fundamental. I get that, but to me, it's important because it's the only contact we have with the golf club.
Yeah. So even like if we said fundamental, we could go to town on that word and go, well, what do you mean by that? Well, it's fundamental because I have to have something on the club. Or do you mean fundamental like it has to look like this? We're like, no, it doesn't have to look like that. No, there's a spectrum of options.
Acceptable, yeah.
Yeah, but I think where the lack of maybe pushing comes from, or kind of definition comes from, is from coaches explaining the linkage and going, well, hey, when you put your trail hand on like this, your lead hand on this, that changes that orientation. And here's the counter effects all the way through. Yeah. So from my perspective, I get a lot of lady golfers, female golfers, very strong lead hands, so very highly rotated. And then explaining to them, okay, well, we can leave it like that, but you're going to have to give me about 90 degrees of side bend to offset that loft and impact. I was like, I don't think that's functional. I think the grip might be easier when we look at that, but we digress. We didn't mention at the start, but you actually have co-authored a book too. And that's called Sports Psych for Winning Golf. And I really like the premise of the book. I haven't read the whole thing. I'll be honest. I'm not one of those guys going, yeah, I've read it. But when I'm looking through it, I got it on Amazon last week, and we'll put the link in for people to buy it. And I really, really like the premise of it because, I've read a lot of sports psychology's book, Raymond Pryor, really good stuff. And, from a coaching mindset, understanding this all, yours is very practical, like really practical stuff, speaking to the club golfer. Hey, you might experience this, try this. Here's a chart where you can give yourself scoring out of 10, what you're doing. And I really, really like that. And so I think a lot of the golf psychology books, and I'm not labeling it that as such, but similar kind of trend, nearly try to explain it too much. And yours more practical. I was just wondering if you were, and not to give the book away, obviously, right? We still want you to make it, percentages. Some of the strategies that you have in that book, if you were saying to some club golfers who perhaps are struggling with a little bit of confidence or a little bit of competence on the golf course, maybe kind of a little bit anxious about, even the season coming up, what are some strategies that they could employ when they're out playing that might help build that confidence or even assess maybe their game a little bit from a different perspective rather than being so critical?
Yeah. First off, glad you purchased the book. Second off, we wanted the book to be a step-by-step plan to how to improve your mental game. I think so many great and your scores ultimately, and your playing, and so many great sports psychology books that I love in golf or other sports, are a lot of great stories, but they don't really say this is how you get better at these skills to lower your scores. And that's where we wanted to come with simple things that really work for high-level players and club golfers. But back to your point, I think one of the biggest things is just learning how, because if you have some anxiety or low confidence or you're nervous out there, is just learning how to breathe and just doing, one or two super quick things. If you have a nice big inhale and a long, slow exhale, you will reduce your anxiety. You will reduce your tension. You will reduce how nervous you are. That one little thing is so simple. Just, taking a deep breath in and a long, slow exhale. I like the inhale to be through the nose and through the exhale to be out the mouth. And just simple things like a physiological sigh that Andrew Huberman talks about. Like these are skills that guys in the PGA Tour are using every single day. And we heard, I think it was Oberg talking about it when he won, focusing on his breathing. But they're all doing it. They don't want to share it. They're not telling anybody. They want to keep these secrets to themselves. And I guess a couple other quick hits on the book, or just improving the game for the club golfers, having a simple, repeatable pre-shot routine that has a nice flow to it or rhythm to it, and I think is really key. And I like quicker than too slow, just because when you get too slow, we start to overanalyze, overthink, and the tension gets higher and we get tighter. So if anything, I want to reduce some of those things by being a little bit more athletic, having it have a nice flow or rhythm and being a tad quicker. And there's some great research on the World DP Tour about players, their time over the ball, the less time over the ball, the more money they're making.
Interesting.
Super great research on that. So, and then I guess a third quick hit on this is I like a post-shot routine, which isn't talked about very often. I actually think that I might have been one of the first losers ever to be on the post-shot routine a long time ago. I started talking about this 15 or 20 years ago. It tells you how much of a geek I am. But, after the ball, post-impact, we've got some time there and we can either make it effective and useful or completely ineffective and snowball bad shots and play terrible. And I think if we can use that, 5, 10, 15 seconds, 20 seconds post-shot for your post-shot routine to either, if you hit a great shot, just give yourself a small fist pump and a smile and go, that was awesome, and remember that shot. Or if you hit a terrible shot, take a deep breath maybe, or just calm yourself down a sec, and then take another practice swing and try and feel what you wanted to have happen, and even visualize what you wanted to have happen. Tap the divot and go, the divot in, and the divot and move on. And again, these are small, little, practical, effective things that take 5 to 15 seconds. I think we talked about 3 there: breathing, pre-shot routine, and post-shot routine, that can make a big difference. And the best players in the world are doing, but also, it can help the club golfer a ton.
Yeah, I think they're all fantastic. And, I know I've done some work with NeuroPeak Pro throughout the last couple of 2 or 3 years. And, with their Intel belt and training breathing and trying to get out of that, fight or flight. And as you talked about Oberg and the box breathing, I think it's one of those things that, as you said, it's not talked about enough. But as you're validating, every single player on tour is doing this because it's the little things to get better. And I remember hearing about Tiger and his post-shot routine was he basically gave himself 10 steps. I think it was 5 or 10 steps to berate himself as much as he liked. And I'm not encouraging this, And then once it was done, it was done. So you pick a spot. And I was like, I don't know whether that's true. And we were watching him in Mount Julia for the Amex the first time it came to Ireland. And we were watching him come off a green in the first round, and there wasn't many people around. And he just three-putted, and very rare, right? You never saw that. And he's walking towards us, and the sign for the hole number is right beside where I'm standing. And about 10 feet away from it, he just starts kind of going, fuck, fuck, bleep. And once he hits the sign beside us, done. And he just went. And I'm like, oh, all right. So that's kind of true. You know, yeah.
Hey? And I love the fact that I don't mind the fact that he got it out. It just, he didn't let it stay for the rest of the round.
Yeah.
Was it 10 seconds? Well, in his case, it was 10 seconds. It could even be 20 seconds, but it's not, not an hour worth of berating yourself or 2 hours worth of berating yourself.
Yeah.
You know, and so sometimes some people have to get it out too, Steve. Like they know themselves and I got to get that out. Okay, no problem. Give yourself 10 or 15 or 20 seconds, get it out, move on. And some people, it's not going to be helpful to do that, but knowing yourself, but I love that. And I know Tiger is the guy who shows a lot of emotion, gets super pissed off, but then by the time he's hitting that next shot, you're looking going, he looks so calm and relaxed now. What happened?
Yeah, it's crazy. I remember even talking to there was a Rick Sessinghouse a little bit about this, and he was like the idea that everybody should be calm, and if you're at one and zen, you'll play great golf. And he said in his experience, he'd met players if we're going on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being zero calm, you know, you're relaxed, and 10 being you're like a volcano. He was like, many players out there need to be a 5 or 6 to play their best. That's just who they are. And then you got guys who want to be a 0 who play their best. You got to find maybe your level of that. And like, you know, do you perform better when you're a little bit on edge? Or are you a little bit, you know, you need to be calm? And I think it's only a question you can really answer if you look back and assess your rounds of golf. Like, when I played great, you know, what was I thinking or what was I experiencing? It can kind of be a good way.
Yeah, I love how you put that. There's the two extremes. I'm a little bit older, but Tiger Woods in his prime, a little bit fiery, would get pissed off and then refocus. David Duval in his prime, who was just like this the whole time. People didn't enjoy watching David Duval. They thought he was boring and had no pulse. So they just knew what worked for them, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think when you're nearly with David and his dad and that family and being around that, you nearly by proxy, a little bit like Steph Curry, you nearly by proxy learn all these things that you aren't told to learn. You just pick up on how things are done. Yeah. You know, and you just arrive then and you're really, really good at them. And I think Earl Woods did a fantastic job where he had to actually teach Tiger all this stuff, and then his mom having that influence from the, you know, the breathing side of things and the mantra. But it's a really, really interesting thing when you start looking at the habits of the best in the world versus just, okay, well, they great golf swings. Yeah. But how did they manage all the other stuff? It is fun.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. And those small things add up. They're huge. They're big difference makers.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So if we moved on a little bit to the coaching side of things, in regards to your own coaching outlook, and I wanted to ask you this from the technical perspective, what you see in golf swings and so forth, and because of your role, the personal interaction and development perspective, who or what has been some of your biggest influences up to this point? Has it been more experience to just, you know, failing and learning, or have you encountered certain people for a long time over the period of your career where you've gone, you know, I've really learned a lot from that person?
Yeah, I would think it's a little bit of both. Like from a trial and error standpoint, I've made a lot of mistakes over the years, and you know, I've made a note of those. I've been able to reflect and go, hey, that didn't work, Derek. I'm going to stop doing that. I'm going to put a bullet in that. That's not something I thought that was a pillar for me, but it's not, and it's not working. But then I've had really good influences. Like I'm a big Jim Hardy guy. I got to know Jim. I got to learn from him in person. You know, read his books. watched his videos, and you know, his 1 plane and 2 plane swing, and talking about being too steep and too shallow. Like a lot of that stuff really resonated with me as a coach. And I was like, oh, I really like that stuff. That's great stuff. And also Jim played the PGA Tour, which I loved. And Chuck Cook is another mentor of mine that, like, I've known Chuck for 15 years, and I went and spent time with Chuck, and he reminds me of Foley a little bit, just because they're so charismatic and such great speakers, and an unreal coach, Chuck, and also an unreal player, played in the U.S. Senior Open and the British Senior Open, I think the U.S. Open as well. And so, those are some of my big influences. And then locally, I've had, like a friend of mine, Garth Gudbranson, who's been one of the best coaches in Canada for 100 years, and just really smart, but only stayed in Manitoba and coached many of the best players here. I've got Canadian influences, like Henry Brunton was a real big influence. I worked for Henry, and not necessarily on the technical aspect, Henry, but Henry was really smart, a researcher. He started with the foundation of not making anyone worse. We're going to start at the foundation. I'm not going to make anyone worse, and then I'm going to work to make them better. And that actually kind of makes sense to me. I'm going to try not to make people bad.
I like that idea. That could work.
If I'm going to run a business, I'm going to try not to ruin people. I'm going to try and make them better. So
yeah.
And I've been fortunate enough to just steal from so many people. And I'm not going to lie, I'm trying to steal from you, Steve. And I'm in the arms race. I'm trying to steal and borrow stuff from anybody to help myself be a better coach, both because I'm in the technique arms race, but also in how I deal with people as well. So I'm probably missing a million people there, and not doing a very good job of answering the question. But I have a lot, like even on the PGA Tour, lots of guys out there I really respect and I think are unreal coaches. Mark Blackburn's a good friend of mine. I really respect Mark. I think he's one of the top coaches in the world, but and he's also a great communicator. So anyway, I probably butchered that question, but
no, this is the thing I love about doing this podcast. We talked a little about this before we jumped on air, was being authentically you, right? No matter who you are. And so I think when I get people on the podcast, it's only happened on rare occasions where I get, and I know they're not really telling it how it is. They're trying to tell it to narrate a story. I'm like, no, just say what you think, right? That's what people.
I got none of that in me. I wish I had some of that. But you're going to get it whether you like it or not, and you're going to be like, oh, I wish I would have asked him that. He just ran off on. But that's just who I am. I can't shut my mouth.
Yeah.
And I'm not smart enough to make up stuff that I'm going to have a hard time remembering. So I just tell you exactly what I'm thinking.
I like that. Speaking of Mark, it kind of nice segue into what Mark does, and Mark's heavily, like, obviously, TPI will be synonymous with Mark and how he does things. So he likes the body movement, and he's becoming more involved with the 3D in terms of what he's doing. And we've had a big advent in 3D, especially over the last 2 years with the mobile apps. And so it's become a lot wider, more readily available to coaches. There's still the standard, obviously, which is AMM or the Bull 3D system I use, where we're actually putting sensors on people. But how do you feel about that technology personally? And then do you use it with your players on tour a lot, or how much are you using it, or do you trust it, and so forth?
So I love 3D, and I was an early adopter on 3D 100 years ago when the AMM came out. I almost bought an AMM system. At that point, I tested or put my players on our national team every single year if we could afford it. Sometimes it would be every second year. Sometimes it was twice a year. I love that information as a coach from a background. Some players I'd like to share it with. Some players I just stick it in the back pocket. And I got a story about a player. I've also used K-Vest in their system over the years. And I'm a big fan of the Bull system as well. I think it's a premium top, maybe the best system in the world right now. AMM is just, there's none around anymore. Like, it's almost impossible to get.
It's very hard to get, yeah.
And I wish I would have bought, had a chance. Anyway, long story. But I had a chance to buy one about 10 years ago, and I didn't buy it, and I still hate myself for it. But anyway, getting parts and all that stuff for it would make it impossible now at this point. But the story I wanted to talk to you about is one of our top players in Canada. I put him on the K-Vest at this point. I had him on the AMM the year before. And the K-Vest pop up, and I got my laptop, and he's hitting balls. And this player is I'm not going to use his name, but proficient ball striker, one of the best ball strikers in Canada. And at that point, one of the best college players on earth. And every swing, it's popping up on the K-Vest, and it's just red everywhere. Like, there's nothing good. Like from a K-Vest standpoint, it's just all shit. And I'm just like, what am I going to say to this guy? He's like, how? I'm like, looking unreal. Keep doing just a couple more.
Keep going, man.
And he's like, yeah. And then after he's like, I'm like, okay, we're good. We got everything you need. Take enough. Cause I would do 3D with a short iron, like an 8 or a 9 iron, something that you're trying to control the distance and the accuracy, and then do it with the driver. That's kind of how I've always done it. But I got them all done. And after he's like, yeah, how do I do? And do you want me to take a look? I'm like, no, it's unreal. And I'll get back to you with some feedback down the road. But it's fantastic. We got nothing to worry about here. It's maybe the best we've done today.
Just like traffic light red, like on everywhere.
The whole thing seems like, holy shit, what am I can't even find something good he's doing here. And yet, like when you look at his stats, if you look at his TrackMan data or his Foresight Quad data, and if you look at his testing, and if you look at his statistics and his results, one of the top players on the planet in his peer group.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I remember like we were obviously meant to do something in like 6 or 7 weeks ago for me to come down and put some of the Corn Ferry Tour guys on. And one of the guidelines around that was, for me, that you said to me was, I don't want you to talk to them about the information, because you have to be very guarded or nearly careful of what you give to the players. You said you can have a player that, and this is one of my small issues with Sportsbox, is it gives that green, red, you could have a player on that system who does 10 things wrong, but is still functional. And that's the little tricky part about 3D is, from my perspective with coaching now, it's okay, I've got this information, I'm going to use it. And I'm going to tell the person in front of them where they are exactly. And it's like, they don't need to know. No. So there's no such thing as perfect. And I think that only comes with experience, knowing this is only information. As you said, put it in the back pocket, have a chat about it 2 weeks down the road, or if things start going wrong, you can even use it as a reference or a template.
And that's exactly how I do use it. I'm like, oh, they're struggling. This was a red star to me back then, even though they're playing Unreal and hitting an Unreal. And now I see that it's become such an issue that an intervention is required right now. But at that point, 6 months ago or 3 months ago, an intervention wasn't needed. Some things had changed, but now I see, and not all 23 things they're doing wrong. The top priority that's going to have the greatest impact immediately is the one that's probably the one that we need to work on. And so how I like to use 3D in a perfect, I use Box AI. I like it for myself. But the best is like the bowl system or an AMM, and having somebody, an expert, come in and do that. Can I do that? Yes. Am I as good as somebody who uses it day to day? No. Am I good at reading data and talking about golf swings? I like my chances. I'm very strong there, and I'd love to communicate with you. Like that's why I want you to come out and do our Corn Ferry Tour, guys, and you are going to work with me because I don't put people on the sensors on, and I don't put them on, and I don't use the system every single day. I'm not going to be as proficient as somebody who does use it every day. And that's not my job to be that proficient. Capturing that data is not at the high level, isn't what I do right now. I coach on the PGA Tour. I go to almost every single Corn Ferry Tour event. So that's we're partnering with somebody like yourself and some other great people in the world who are high-level 3D people, and then using that. I like to use it once a year in a perfect world. Sometimes I'd like to use it twice a year. And I'd like to use one of those premium systems once or twice a year. And when we have the money with Golf Canada, we have the time with tour players, we do. And then having Sportbox AI is good as well, but I certainly don't show it, every one of these things. Hey, we got 6 reds here. We're going to start over and blow your swing up. I know you're a +7 handicap and you're winning on the tour, but it doesn't matter about that stuff.
I know you just won the Players last week, but that pelvis tilt is going to kill us in 2 weeks, man.
we got to get this all green, or else we got no chance.
or else we're done. Yeah. That's again. It's like with all technology, right? It's kind of like I remember Sasha McKenzie talking about research projects, and it was kind of maybe it was Sasha, maybe it was somebody else, but it was kind of whatever research project you get from a PhD, it's probably what they have in their lab. Do you know what I mean? So they're going to use what they have in their lab. Yes. So if you've just bought the app of Sportsbox and you spend $1,000 on it and you're putting people on it, you're probably going to tell the person, you got to use it, right?
Yeah, but I'm not going to do that because I'm not, we live in a world and I live in a world where I can knock somebody off the PGA Tour to the PGA Tour Canada or PGA, I can take them off the top tour in the world if I'm a dummy. And especially on the Corn Ferry as well, they're 0.5% or 1% from being a PGA Tour player and a very, very good one. And so I'm not going to take, try and ruin guys. So I've got to be smart with that.
Yeah, no, that's a really, really good point. And I think even if maybe coaches who are working with club players took the same kind of, even referring back to what you said, right? Hey, like, in terms of what Henry Brunt was, just don't make them worse, right? Yeah. So even if my advice for a coach who's just encountering 3D for the first time and kind of doing a little bit of a course on this to help is, just collect the data. Don't show it to anybody first 2 months. Just collect the data, collect the shot data, and then go home and just, play around with it and explore it and go, actually that person was okay at that. You know what, my own my players, maybe they don't need to have that green side bend. Maybe in my spectrum, if a guy who's 65 might be a little bit wider than the spectrum than that. And that's my advice for coaches working with 3D for the first time, in terms of, you don't necessarily have to throw it at people. Just learn it yourself in the back end first.
Yeah, I love that. And a lot of times when I get that data on the plane in the way home, or if I'm looking at videos, like I like to look at that myself, and I like to look at it long and hard. And I like to think about it and think about, oh, if I make this change, what kind of changes could make them better or worse? And, I like to mull it over and maybe talk to another high level instructor and say, hey, what do you think? I'm kind of thinking about this.
Yeah.
Ruin them. What do you think? I'm not perfect. I don't know everything. And actually, matter of fact, every day I get up and I think, geez, there's so much more I need to know and so much better I have to get. Whereas when I was 20, I thought I knew it all. Now I'm 54 and I'm like, oh, I can't believe how dumb I am. I've got a long way to go. So it's, and I don't mind throwing it to other people and getting their opinion. Doesn't mean I have to use it, but I like getting other people's opinion.
I think that's just because we're in the coaching section here. I think, and I definitely see that. Even, I see you comment on Mike Carroll Fit for Golf stuff a lot, and your comments are kind of very. I think there's a saying, I forget it now. I think it's be curious, not critical, or something along those lines. And I think it's a really, really good one. And every time I see a comment from you on X, it's more asking the person who's posted it a little bit more information. Oh, that's interesting. I haven't seen it that way, or what would happen in here. And I really think you're taking the best approach to it, but it takes a while to get there as a person, to be that self-comfortable in your own skin, that your ego is in front and center, and you're okay with, hey, I don't know it all, and it's okay to ask questions, right?
I'm a confident guy. I believe in what I'm doing, but I don't know it all at all. And more importantly, the more I can learn, I'm going to have a lot more fun. I'm going to be more effective as a coach, and I'm just interested. I just can't help myself. Oh, and so and Mike's the kind of guy I know. I've known Mike for a while now. So when I'm asking questions, he knows he's not attacking me. This guy wants to discuss it and learn a little bit. And I'm not attacking anyone who knows me. I'm not guy. I'm not looking for fights on social media. I'm looking to just learn a little bit more and get a little better.
You won't have to go far to find fights on social media and coaching. You're good. There's about one you one.
People see. I unfollow them all. Or block.
There's one you on there opening up every day. You'll be good. All right. So if we kind of had a little look here, we're going to have a little look at Corey. Forgive the horrible angle. This is self-filmed by me when I was trying to hide behind the tee markers at the Pro-Am last year at the Canadian Open. So the first thing from my perspective that kind of jumps out is the lead arm, right? So that's kind of, if you're watching Corey for the first time, it's the thing that you're going to kind of go, oh, well, that kind of stands out. But there's so much other good stuff in here. It's crazy. So maybe if you could kind of go through, what are you guys working on at the moment? He seems to be playing very well. Great finish, as you talked about, at Bay Hill. Right in contention again last week at Sawgrass. So, playing very well, or swinging it very well. Yeah. What do you guys work on a lot? What's the focus of most of your range time, let's say?
Yeah, well, we've been kind of layering good day on good day and good week on good week and good month on good month and good year on good year for a long time here. So, but with Corey's lead arm, maybe bends a little bit more. Is that what you're referring to, Steve?
Yeah, just that's the one thing when I first saw him swing a golf club, that's the one thing that stood out to me. And I've encountered it with, potential like Canadian club golfers where I'm talking about that lead arm radius a little bit. And I go, perhaps we don't want it as bent. And they'll go, well, Corey Connors does it, and he's on the PGA Tour. And I'm like, oh, well, you know what? Point taken. You're right. Sorry.
but for Corey, like his background is, he used to keep his lower body in concrete. It's like when he would swing, there'd be very, very little hip turn and not a lot of shoulder turn. So his arms would lift and it would get very long, and the lead arm would bend just to get the club far enough back to have some power. So he's a short hitter. Short to medium hitter who hit the middle of the club face all the time, very consistent, but not a lot of power. So if you look at his lower body, it's turning, like if we put it, 11 years ago compared to now, his lower body's turning a ton and his upper body's turning a ton compared to the old Corey Connors. And that's actually taken a lot of the bend out of the lead arm, and that's the best it's ever been. But as we continue to possibly turn more, I feel there will be less bend in the lead arm, but also that's just who he is. If you look at Victor Hovland at Impact, or if you look at Phil Mickelson at the top of the swing, lots of lead arm bend. When he takes the club back, it gets a little bit inside and the face gets a little closed. I think those are actually kind of fundamentals of some of the best ball hitters on the planet, where they get the face a little bit closed and the club a little bit inside, and so it gets it a little bit shut. But to your point of what we're working on, well, there's some of the stuff we've been working on, a greater hip turn and a greater shoulder turn. And I think a couple other things we've worked on, like I think Rory and Corey turn off or move off the ball more than anybody in the planet. And it was funny, they played together at the Players in round 4 on Sunday, and they played together a few times, but I love watching because, you know, they don't really swing the club alike, but if you look at them from a face on, they kind of do swing the club alike. And both,
interesting.
they both start with a little bit of pressure in their lead leg, and they get way behind. They move off the ball a ton, both of them. And then they get back, they move into it really well. And that's not really, I would say, the modern way, Steve. Like a lot of guys are talking about staying on top of it, right? But
especially over the last 2 days. Oh yeah.
But if you look at Rory and Corey, you're going to see guys who really get off the ball and then they get back into it. And I kind of like that. You know, that's a little bit old school Jimmy Ballard swinging, you know, where there's a lot of moving off the ball. And I think, by the way, on it, Jimmy Ballard's not in the PGA, but he should be in the Hall of Fame for sure. This is for another whole podcast. Don't get me started, Steve, but
okay.
He should be in the Hall of Fame. One of the best instructors ever to touch the planet. But anyway, so with Corey, we work a little bit on starting with a teeny bit of pressure on the lead leg. It allows him to feel like he can get behind it. When he gets behind it, he's going to hit it great. Doesn't matter what I do, because this, you know, face gets a little bit close and he gets that position at the top. I know he's one of the best ball strikers on the planet, and he's going to hit it unreal. We also, and so sometimes he feels like he hangs back, and that's because he stays on top of it, and then in order he'll back up. And when he feels that, you know, he'll lose some of the accuracy. He'll hit it both ways a little bit, and he won't get the great contact. And so simply put, a little bit of pressure on the lead leg, we get behind it, and from there he finds it really easy to move into it. And when he does that, he's literally going to be one of the best ball hitters on the planet, day in, day out. He almost never misses the middle of the club face. His stats over the last 5 or 6 years are right up there with the top 10 players in the game, like a Scotty Scheffler and a Xander and Colin and like any, you know, JT. Like, so there's lots of other stuff we've worked on.
That's the main.
But those are kind of the quick hits.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I was out in Vegas 4 months ago, spent some time with Butch Harmon, and you know, just hanging out, watching him teach, and he's going through the motions with one of the players, and this player in particular, like pretty decent golfer, but had issues in their trail kneecap and ligaments, right? So it was actually swollen at that time, and so, you know, the player was kind of remaining on their lead side a little bit to kind of maybe facilitate that. And Butch's rule when you go watch him is you can say whatever you want once the person leaves the bay, right? So once they're gone, you can ask whatever you want and it's fine. You cannot say anything during the lesson, right? And I would have taken that rule anyway, but this was said before we kind of went in. And I'm like, yeah, no problem whatsoever. And then so once this guy left, I was like, hey, Butch, would you ever contemplate just leaving the guy on the left side? Nope. I was like, well, you know, just if you like, you know, maybe he wouldn't have to. No, he needs momentum. He needs momentum to move the golf club. And it was really, really, because, you know, nearly me trying to be this polished perfectionist coach, taking into all this macro, you know, nearly trying to be too smart about it and go, oh, well, he's probably got injuries there, so he's adapting, and the trauma is emanating up his brain, you know, so let's leave him on his lead. And Butch's like, nah, fuck that. Get him onto the right side, create momentum and get him moving. I was like, yeah, perfect. And so like, I think it's wherever that person stands on who they are, how they see the world and how they like to move. But there are certain guidelines, and, you know, Butch did those 3 or 4 days without any, there was video. Yeah, he's using V1, but there was no launch monitors. There's definitely no 3D. There was definitely no talks about ground forces whatsoever. But that's really interesting that, you know, just in the context of the last couple of days, there's been a lot of discussion around how that lead shoulder moves early, and perhaps maybe it moves more down, and there's more spine tilt. And you're not saying, you know what, it was really interesting to see both these players and how similar they move the body, where, you know, Rory moves a little bit that way, Corey moves a little bit that way. And both, as you said, like if you had to make a list of top 5 strikers on the PGA Tour, both those guys would probably be in that top 5, right?
In my book, they would for sure. And I think the stats back that up. Like, I don't have to bullshit people. They can just go look in the PGA Tour the last years and see who the best iron players and the best drivers are. And it's a little bit unique though, right? Like if you look at Corey's swing, you're not going, oh geez, I want every player I coach to, get a little bit shut and get a little bit inside. And I want a little bit of a limited, lower body movement, although that's way better than we were. And he's hitting it way further as a result of a larger hip turn and a larger shoulder turn, and maybe a little less of an arm swing. And swing at the top, with the arm bent. But those, again, a bent arm at the top, I see other great players do that sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't see it at Impact, as you know. So to me, that's just something unique to Corey and his DNA. And I work around some of that stuff to help him become, hopefully a major winner one day.
Absolutely. So if we're kind of looking at, we'll take Corey out of the way there and we'll look at Taylor. And kind of a little bit of an idiosyncratic action in terms of how he moves the golf club in backswing.
Yeah. Where's this from, Steve?
I'm not too sure. I pulled this off YouTube.
Awesome. I love this. When you sent me the outline, I was like, oh, we're going to look at swings. This is sick.
I think from the coaching section, it's more practical, right? I want to get your perspective on what you're working on with your players. And especially like a good friend of mine, Jason Sutton, who does a lot of work with Will McGirt, a couple of other guys with kind of idiosyncratic actions, similar to Taylor. I want other coaches to see it and how you navigated around this, because it'd be very easy to say, oh, hey, that gets a little steep early, blah, blah. Because this is nearly the opposite to Corey, right? In terms of how that club moves early.
Sure.
And then you have the pitch up at the shaft and backswing, gets a little across the line. I posted up a picture of Greg Norman the other day, which was very, very similar to that position. It's not, it's a good spot to be in. And then kind of throws it a little bit behind him in downswing and nearly kind of reverses it a little bit. So what do you work on with Taylor most? And obviously 2022, 24 President's Cup, won last year, Byron Nelson. This guy could play golf, right? So what are you guys mainly working on when it comes to Taylor's swing?
Yeah, I mean, well, he's the action is, again, part of his DNA. The last 6 or 7 years, we've had so many injuries with Taylor. Okay. Lots of shoulder, elbow, hand, neck. Like we've had so many injuries, but a lot of shoulder ones where we weren't even sure we were going to be able to move the club, or he had time. Like he skipped months and months and been on medicals, etc. So it varies how much the club gets lift on the way back based on how hurt he is and how sore the body is. But he's always had a very, the lead arm's always been kind of very vertical at the top of the swing. Okay. And, that's something I was like, oh, geez, in my mind, wrestling in my head and talking to other instructors like yourself, I'm like, I wonder if I should shallow that out. I kind of like a deep round lead arm. But then I'm like, no, Derek, nobody reroutes it better than Taylor Pendrith. And he might have the best downswing on the PGA Tour in terms of returning it to the ball. Like I see it, I'm like, oh geez, this his return back to the ball is unreal. And can he produce high level shots under pressure? Absolutely. Is his testing unreal? Yes. Is it results in the course incredible? Okay, why are we going to try and make this look better? For like, I'm all on function. Is it going to function? Yes. Okay, let's get going. And now I think if we looked at a swing maybe more recently, there wouldn't be quite as much because he's feeling okay. But he's still going to have that, Steve. He's still going to always get a little bit.
Yeah.
And I don't mind that. Like I kind of like that kind of type of swing. Now, when people look at him, they're like, "Oh, this coach must know nothing," and they're probably right. But we've done okay. We've done okay with it. And so, what are we working on? Taylor's gotten a little bit too cutty in the last 6 or 8 months. Where he's not able to hit, because when he's playing his best, he fades his driver and he draws all other clubs. Mm-hmm. Push draws with every other club, but with the driver, we hit the ball a little bit more in front, forward in the stance. We hit up on it a tad more, and it drops right, and allows him for a longer hitter with the guys with some speed to have a little more control. Everything else is a baby push draw when we're on, and we're starting to get back to that.
So would his, just on that, sorry for interrupting you, would his swing direction pretty much be similar across the board?
Yes.
And then just because of the alternate in ball position, that you get a draw pattern versus a fade pattern?
Correct.
Okay,
correct.
Perfect. Yeah.
And we play on that. And, Taylor doesn't, he doesn't want to overthink stuff, and he doesn't want 1,000 things going through his head. So just, tell me what I need to do to play good. And so we actually, off the irons, we aim right at the club or right at the target often, and try and play a push draw, which, and he's great like that. With the driver, we, again, get the ball a tad more forward in the stance. We hit up on a tad more, and we just get a shot that drops to the right. Some of the stuff we've been working on, recently we've been working on, I'll simply put an alignment stick out in front and say, I want you to try and hit a push draw around this stick. Yeah, I'd like to sound a little more technical and a little smarter for you and your guests, but that's what we've been doing. So you asked and I'm telling you.
But it's the simple stuff, right? You have this preconceived notion when you're a young coach, or even if it's a club golfer, you're watching these guys on tour and you're like, oh man, this must be a beautiful mind type of shit where like they're like y plus z equals squared. And it's not. When you get out, like you're dealing with the best players. Sometimes it gets a little intricate, but I think for the most part, in my experience working with those players and being around great coaches like you and other guys, is it's pretty much the simple stuff. You're just doing the same stuff over years and years and just finding different ways to narrate it, and maybe trying to get the player to kind of come up with their own little regurgitation of the phrasing and the imagery, really, a little bit.
For sure. And when they own it, it's a lot better than when I own it. Like if they say, like when I just do this, I hit it good. I'm like thinking to myself, I can't get my book out of my back pocket quick enough to write that down so I don't forget it. So I can read, because I carry a small little book with me, and I'm like, oh shit, I got to write that down so I remember. But again, when they have ownership of it, it's unreal. So we've been with Taylor, we've been playing pretty good for a long time. Last year had a great putting year. If you look at his trend the last 5 years, he's driving it straighter than he ever has. So where strokes gained off the tee, we've been doing great there. He's always been fairly long, so he's hitting it straighter, making less mistakes off the tee, and he's hitting more and more greens in regulation, where he used to be a player that missed a lot of greens, had a great short game and putter, and drove it far and crooked, but would score it well. And we had our good weeks, we'd have good weeks. But now he's turned into a player that's a lot more consistent, drives it on a rope far, hits a million greens in regulation, and when he putts good, has a chance to win, but almost always plays well. And if you could choose, that's probably what you want. Although if you can't choose, long and wrong, and having a great short game and a good putter and playing good 3 or 4 times a year in the PGA Tour is a decent recipe as well.
Yeah, you can make some nice money by just peaking at certain times.
Yeah.
You kind of mentioned the putting thing here, and this is kind of the other kind of video I wanted to look at, and this is from last year, again at the Canadian Open, and this is you and Corey on the putting green, on the practice putting green, and what you'll see for people who are just listening in is they got a couple of tails, a couple of mats down. Corey's hitting the putt from, let's say, about 6-7 feet below the hole, and he's going to go around. He's going to go above the hole. He's going to have about 10 feet above the hole. He's going to do a little aim point, figuring out, go back. So basically, when you guys are doing this, is this, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is this the stack system pre-putting round, or is this your own routine that you come up with where you're going to go, okay, we're going to have one 8-footer up the hill left to right. We're going to have one 12-footer down the hill right to left. If we can, tour putting greens get a little bit busy. So if we were to describe what's going on there, what are you actually working on?
Well, I use the Stack putting app a lot with both my athletes. I love it as a random testing app. They enjoy it as well. But I think in this case, I'm doing a putting drill where I'm picking random putts, 5, 8, 12, 15, 5, 8, 12, 15. So that's 8. And then a 10-footer is 9. And I'm picking the putts. They're reading them as a team, the caddy and the player. Sometimes they ask me, I'm aim point certified, but I like them to work on their skills together, because that's what we're going to need under the gun. And I'm not going to be around, although I do have an opinion on reading greens, and I love using aim point. And so I think we're just doing a drill here, and our goal is, PGA Tour standard, I think, is 14 on that, and our goal is to beat 14. Otherwise, we'll redo it. So I think that is this pre-round, or is this practice?
I think it was practice, because it was on the Wednesday. It was on Pro-Am Day.
Yeah, that's good. That was practice. So yeah, we've got a series of drills, of a number of them too. We've got good variety. Could be the Stack app, and I'm just reading out what's next. But I think it was at one of those drills I'd given them. So. And we're just working that process, practicing reading the putt and then the pre-shot routine. And, I think every player should have a home base putting, home base station, or a base station for their putting and a base station for their full swing practice, something you touch on base every day for 5 or 10 or 15 minutes on. And, but in this case, we're doing some random work there.
And very nicely moving on, segued in. This wasn't intentional. We mentioned this earlier on at the very start with Tristan Mullally, another good Irish lad, have created this company. So both online social platform presence, it's called Tour Habits. And now you've actually started selling training aids in terms of putting right now. So you're selling the ghost hole discs and also a training mat. Where did that come about? The idea for the Tour Habits, concept in terms of the online platform and then the selling the product. And how have you as a golf coach, experienced the entrepreneur kind of side of things of getting training aids to the market?
Yeah, so how Tour Habits started, I think it was back maybe at the 2016 Olympics in Rio. T and I went out there early to map the golf course. And we said, hey, we should do something together. We kind of like hanging out together. We're both golf coaches and, we should do something together. So we started talking and then buried it for 4 or 5 years and then came back to it and said, hey, most people are doing really good stuff on technique or really bad stuff on technique on social media. And there's so many guys out there.
50-50.
What's that?
50-50. Yeah.
So easy to do in the sense, like I can pop up Adam Scott's swing here and I can analyze it and tell everybody how brilliant I am. Adam Scott doesn't know who Derek Ingram is. Actually, I do know Adam, but so I wouldn't. But and it's kind of easy and it's kind of interesting in itself. But we're like, we want to do something a little bit different, not that everyone else is doing. So we wanted to take a look at what the best players in the world are doing and how they prepare and practice and share that with golfers so they can steal some of those ideas to help them with their practice and improve more. So that's kind of where it came from. And, we're both strong in that area as well as, as a coach, you got to be strong in everything, but we're strong in that area. And we thought, hey, maybe we can share what the best players in the world are doing with golfers. And they're going to kind of steal some of those things, like I said, and help improve their game. So that's where it came from. And we started sharing some stuff. We're having a lot of fun doing it. Tristan's a brilliant coach and a great guy and a very good friend. And so, so that's, and our Tour Habits, you mentioned some products. We came up, one of the reasons this is a Tour Habits full swing training towel. We've got the full swing putting, a putting towel as well. And like you said, some ghost holes with some technology in them. But we wanted to come up just from being on the PGA Tour and the LPGA Tour all these years and the Corn Ferry Tour. We just noticed that many of the best players in the world have a station that they're practicing with for full swing and putting. And they're, like I said, they're using it for 5 to 10, maybe 15 minutes a day, just touching home base, knowing that, hey, if I do some of these drills, or if I work on this for 5 or 10 minutes, I'm not going to get too far off and I'm going to layer good day on good day and keep getting better. And so we thought, hey, we should do something like that. And so we see a lot of alignment sticks. Some people's base station is really, really simple. Like an alignment stick, and some is very complex, like a Justin Rose. He's got sticks everywhere. You might get harpooned by an alignment stick. Stuff going on there. But everything has something that works for them. So we came up with the full swing training towel. Basically has about 8 or 10 or 12 different ways you can use it in configurations. It can simply be an alignment aid between you and the ball. It can be in front of the ball as a channel to aim over and try and or aim right of and turn it into, or aim left and fade it into. It gives you feedback on ball position, club face at address, and then there's got some swing arc feels for full swing where you can try and feel like you're 2D coming a little more from the inside, or maybe want to fade a little bit more from the outside, and certainly some angle of attack stuff. You're trying to get more ball, and so and then we wanted something that was inexpensive that people could afford and that could just plop on their golf bags. So we decided to make it in a towel format. So worst case scenarios, if you didn't like it, you could clean your golf ball. That would
you still have some,
that would rattle my cage, Steve.
Yeah.
And so that's how we came up with the full swing training towel. We're really proud of it. And it just last week, I was at the Players and Nick Taylor walked by and he's like, hey, when am I going to get my training towel and my putting towel? Like, I saw you gave one to Mac, and I was like, well, I didn't want to impose on you. He's like, oh, I want one.
Mac needed it more.
What's that?
You should have just said Mac needed it more.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I'm not a heavy. I'm the last thing I am is a sales guy or a guy who pushes stuff. I'm the worst. And in our business, we should be. But like when players are actually asking you for it, please give me one. I'm like, oh, geez, I need to get this. So it's doing really, really well. And same with our putting towel. On our putting towel, I don't want to hijack the whole podcast.
No, you're good. That's why I asked you about it. Yeah, because I find it's really anything. My stance around training aids and using them with players is my problem is, challenge is, okay, well, I've spent $250 on this thing for my coaching. I can use it on 20 different people over the next 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But as soon as you leave my studio, you don't have it. So how are you using it? So that's why I like what you guys are doing, because people aren't going to spend a boatload of money on this, but it's really practical and really easy. So that's why, like, no, please go ahead. So there's the full swing and then the putting one here. Yeah.
The putting towel is a smaller towel that you can use in the putting green. Same thing, gives you feedback on face angle at address, ball position, some really neat things on ball position and distance from the ball. And then we've got 2 arcs. One with a smaller arc for a mallet or a big, like where you'd have smaller arcing, almost no arc, and then a heel, toe hang putter, which would have a little bit more. And I've looked at Phil. I know Phil Kane's stuff. I've known him for years. Great guy, by the way. I don't know if you had Phil in the pod, but if you don't, he's
not yet.
You love the guy. He's an unreal guy. But anyway, but I think, there's really only need for 2 arcs. We have 5 or more. You can have 100 if you wanted. But really, if you have a mallet or a spider, you need a very small arc, an 8 degree. And if you have a toe hang putter, then you need a little bit more. So we've got those on there as well. And the putting towel can also be used for some putting drills. So again, both have, over 10 different uses. A base station or a home base you can touch base and use every day for 5 or 10 minutes to make sure your practice is effective, and then just throw it in your golf bag and you've got it.
And in terms of, you have the Tour Habits, the Instagram is just Tour Habits. You'll find that. If for buying the towel or buying the training aids, it's a different website, is it? What's the name?
No, just if you go to tourhabits.com, you'll get it.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. And bonus, you don't have to pay any tariffs.
No tariffs, they're all Canadian made.
Gotta plug it.
That doesn't happen, but no tariffs, Canadian made. Yeah, we're really proud of the products. We really spent a lot of time, like well over a year, trying to think of, we can do an alignment stick, but thinking about what we could use, and we're like, hey, we want people to be able to have this. Yeah. And you are right, Steve. Some training aids that we use, like my studio's full of junk. And some of it's 1,000 or 500 or 2,000 or 5,000, and not one person's buying a $1,500 training aid to take. Yeah. But with a home-based station like this, you can really improve your practice. If you make a purchase, you get access to our private YouTube channel, which tells you how to use all these things and a couple other cool tips.
Perfect. One last thing before we go. Last year, you and Tristan did a really cool thing where, I think it was last year, if my timing's right, where you did kind of like a webinar for other coaches. Any plans to do something similar like that this year in terms of your experience, what you guys are, you're more the educational side of thing for other coaches?
Yeah. T's been bugging me. If I didn't travel 360 days a year, but he's been bugging me. He's like, listen, we've got another one to do. I think people will love it. And we're on it, probably the fall time. We have a lot, we'll do a seminar like that. And I spoke at the PGA of Manitoba a couple of days ago. And I'll hear some guys talking and I'll be writing down stuff. I almost cheating, like I'm stealing stuff from people when I'm doing them. So I always say to them, like, I'm not sure if they're getting more out of this or we are, but the feedback from the first one is people really loved it because we have a bit of a unique perspective on stuff. So yeah, we do have something coming down the pipeline in the fall.
Perfect. It might be a good idea, maybe at some stage, even on that Tour Habits website, you could even throw up the one from last year and maybe put a little price point on it. And because I think people would find, I attended, I thought it was really fascinating from a tour coaching perspective, the drills, the tasks that you're using, and a lot of really great information there. So that might be an idea in the future.
You're such horrible business guys. But we're terrible business people. So that's a great idea. I should like that.
There you go. I'll get a commission out of that. Derek, thank you so much, mate, for coming on. Really appreciate it. As I said at the start, authentically you, giving it honestly, and I really do appreciate it. I'm sure everybody else will too. Getting that insight into the players that you work with, how you see coaching, a little bit of help for those club golfers. So thank you very much, and look forward to working with you, hopefully at some stage this year.
Absolutely, and my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Steve. Really and also looking together, getting together in person and doing some work.
Perfect. Cheers, man.
Cheers, Doug.
All right, everyone. So that wraps up another episode. Massive thank you to Derek for coming on the show. To follow Derek on social media, the handle is @DIngramGolf. To follow the Tour Habits account, it's @TourHabits. And to check out some of their fantastic training aid line, go to tourhabits.com. That's TOURHABITS.com. Big thank you to you, the listeners out there, as without you listening and downloading these podcasts, there wouldn't really be a show. I appreciate the support and the feedback. And just a reminder, if you do enjoy, please make sure to rate the show on either Apple Podcasts or Spotify. As always, if you want to work with myself in person or online, or indeed have any questions on golf or the podcast, you can contact me on Instagram at SteveMooreGolf or through the website SteveMooreGolf.com. Finally, for your own game, don't forget, work hard, work diligently, but most importantly, work smart, and we'll talk to you again soon.